Okay, how you doing, everybody? This is John Doyle from OptixEQ. I'm here with Chris Larmey, just all-around good guy, NHC uh, Hall of Famer, and been involved with optics, as part of this whole process and doing this horse ratings. And we're going to do the Preakness preview. Chris, what do you think?
I think it turned out to be an interesting race myself. I was
Yeah,
surprised. There's more to it than I had originally thought there would be. It shaped up to be a much better race than I expected. So it should be fun discussion.
all right, so we're going to do a little handicapping. We show the optics product, and then we're going to try to define these horses in types of user ratings. And Chris and I may have some differences, so we'll talk about those. And then maybe a way to approach the race from a betting perspective, and it depends what pool you're in, really, too, Chris, because I see this. I don't know how you do this. Sometimes it depends on the pool I'm going for. If I'm playing a pick 6 pool, my A, B's, and C's look different than if I'm playing a pick 4 pool or a pick 5 pool even. And then my vertical bets may even be different than some of my horizontal bets, in terms of who I'm keying off of and so forth. And
Yeah,
then,
I totally agree. The thing I would stress though is I try to form my opinion before I even think about what pools do I want to play into, and then try to make those bets and those pools match the opinion.
exactly.
If that makes sense.
No, that's perfect.
I try not to say, "Oh, I'm going to play the pick 6," right? Because it
Exactly
may turn out it's not a good bet.
right.
I'd rather say, "Wow, you know what? I like this sequence. This is probably one I want to take a look at. Maybe the pick 5 or
Yeah.
pick 6."
Well, sometimes
Or it
because
might be,
to get to that point, you have to assess the race. And like, so for instance, I may say a favorite is, this is a favorite that's an A in terms of a pick 6. But if I'm playing a pick 4, it's a horse that I might want to short, or I might want to like just back up with. I see the race differently. So I just kind of think in those terms, right? I mean, how do you? Because I think the first thing I like to do, and I don't know, maybe that's the place to start, is assess the favorite, right? Because I think this journalism is going to be a very, very heavy favorite, don't you think? And so, what do you do with
yeah.
them? Yeah, get. You gonna say something?
I was going to say, you never know how in the win pool. You never know in the Preakness and Derby what they're going to do. So, if you like journalism a lot, you might actually get a price you want to bet to win. It may be higher than you would expect on a normal, if this was a Saturday on a regular card, I'm guessing he'd go off at, 3 to 5, but he might
Yes.
be the morning line 8 to 5. I don't know. It's hard to predict. There's some crazy betting that goes on in this win pool in the Preakness.
It's true. And it's when you look at this race, at least this is my first assessment of the race. When I looked at it, I was like, okay, journalism is journalism. He's got the class, he's faster than all these horses, right? He's seasoned. And he's capable of coming just off the pace, well off the pace. I mean, he can sit a trip, and you could see on the plot he's this big square, right? So he can finish. Then you have a bunch of horses that have kind of been through the mill to some extent, and they're kind of close. And then I see like 2 horses that potentially have a lot of upside, and maybe are better than they look on paper right now, better at least on the plot. And I was looking at, the one looks good. One was one of those horses, an 8 for me was the other. But the other horses are just kind of like been there, done that to me. And out of those horses, I think the way I was approaching this race, I thought there might be value in picking one of those horses in that group that might go off a long price. And that's one was I was looking at was Pay Billy. But anyway, I don't want to get into it too much. What was your opinion of the favorite, and where do you stand, and how would you rate this horse? If like we have this rating system here, right? This tool that we built,
Right.
and I think we'll just go through them and rate the horses in the pool.
So why don't we start with rating him, and
Yeah.
then we can work off of that. We don't necessarily have to go in post position order. So
Okay, let's start with journalism. So again, just for a reminder of people that are using the tool, this is in the plot, and you can rate horses tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 contenders, and you could tweak it a little bit more too. There's a plus and minus and neutral in that. So, but those are the win contenders. I rated journalism a tier 1 minus contender when I was kind of looking at the race initially. Where were you at?
yeah, I would probably rate him the same. I don't think he completely lays over this field the way some do, but he's definitely, a notch above anybody else in the field in terms of, demonstratability, at the top level, all the things you mentioned. But from a pattern standpoint and a number standpoint, I don't think he's quite the standout as some people do. I mean, he is a little faster, but if you look at his last race, other than and it depends on what speed figures you use. The numbers for optics, the Brisk numbers, sometimes they differ from others. And that
Right.
was a tough day to make numbers on. Derby
Right.
day, remember, it was raining all day long. I talked to some people who make figures, and they're guessing.
Sure.
So I wouldn't put too much stock into that. But he certainly ran a good race, right? But he did get run down in the stretch, and he probably had about as good a race as you could hope to have with his style in the Derby with 20-horse field. So, it's not like he's coming to this race off a Big Brown win in the Derby or a Barbaro win in the Derby. He
Right.
didn't even win the race. So I don't put him in the same league as some of the really good horses that Justifies and Pharaohs and stuff coming in. But you have to assess him against this competition.
Exactly.
And, that's where I still got to make him a 1-, even though I
Yes.
think there are some chinks in the armor. He's still a notch or two above everybody else. So I kind of rambled a bit there, but that's
No. Yeah, I think you got to it. I mean, it's who you're running against, right? Even all said and done. I mean, it's like who's really accomplished in this field. And like I said, I think that's why I was more leaning to horses that were lightly raced coming into this race, because it's typically a profile too. I think the Preakness, right? Usually get that lightly raced horse kind of steps up. Other than and the other thing about traditionally, the Derby horses do run pretty well coming back. The one thing I noticed, I didn't do a deep dive. I'm not a big trainer statistic guy, but McCarthy doesn't do this move often. I don't know if that's good or actually bad, right? Because it could be like he's confident, or it could be, wow, he doesn't usually run horses back this quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, I don't think it's going to make the difference between him winning or losing. But to me, and we'll never answer this question, but if it was just up to the trainer, this horse would not be in this race. I'm pretty confident he wouldn't run. He might say he would, but I think this is, the ownership group. They all want to, win a Triple Crown race, but I think he would much prefer to give him more time. Just like you said, this is not his style at all.
Right.
He doesn't wheel back. Wayne Lucas wheeling back doesn't surprise anybody. Bob Baffert wouldn't hesitate if he thought the horse was good, but McCarthy, I don't put in that group. So to me, it's a negative. It doesn't fit with his style. And I was a little surprised that they're in this race, to be honest, given the way horses are trained today and the potential this horse has for a big campaign going forward. So I think it's a bit of a negative, but I never let that talk me off playing a horse coming back on short rest. I'm not one of these people who will fade those horses. I typically have found that they run the race, but where they pay the price is the next time out. Usually it kind of drains them, and it can actually knock them out. And if you look at the horses who've done this in recent years, if they're not trained by Bob Baffert, they typically don't run very well after the Preakness. So I think they may pay a price, but the reward may be, a win in a Triple Crown race.
Yeah. Well, maybe they're thinking they're going to skip, the the Belmont / Travers, or what do you want to call it? Belmont at Saratoga.
Yeah.
Maybe they're skipping that race, and they.
Oh, I'm sure if they win this, that McCarthy would like to skip it. But again, I have a feeling they might want to go. They're thinking, hey, if we can go win the Belmont, then we're leading the other way on, 3-year-old champion. I don't know. I don't know how these.
I don't know. I don't know. Those championships are won later in the year, I think.
That's right. That's why I wouldn't be in this race if I had.
Yeah, but or you take this race because it's going to be an easier race than the Belmont, because you wouldn't want to skip the Belmont if you skip this race, right? And maybe they feel, hey, this is a win we can get. Belmont,
yeah, I'm sure that's what they're saying.
Coming back,
Yeah.
So anyway.
I agree. There's no doubt. This is traditionally on the racing calendar. This is the weakest Grade 1 dirt route you'll find. It's the Preakness, because nobody wants to run in it other than the Derby winner. So, so there's no doubt
about changing the formats and stuff like that. And at this point, I'm for looking at doing things differently too.
Yeah, that's going to happen sooner or later.
I understand traditional rest, but please, I mean, you got to move on at some point. Things are different. All right, so let's look at some of the other horses. Let's start with goal oriented because that horse is coming right back too off of a win at Churchill on the same day, ran a good figure according to us. It was an optional claiming. I thought the horse looked like he had something left in reserve there. Looks like an improving horse on Bob Baffert. I think the horse could sit, just off the pace. Maybe he could save ground on some of these horses. He could work out a pretty good trip. He plots well. He can finish. I think I put him as my second contender. I made him a tier 2 contender in this race. How about you? What was your opinion of this horse?
Yeah, this is one of the two horses I think we have a different opinion on. I'm not nearly as high as you are on this horse. To me, this is like a big time audible call. They weren't planning to run him back in the Preakness. They were going to run Rodriguez or Citizen Bowl, and Citizen Bowl, didn't run too well in the Derby. Rodriguez, they ended up scratching. They still swore they were going to run the Preakness, and then something went wrong, and so now all of a sudden they're going to run goal oriented. Not only that, to me, this is the tell that I really think this horse isn't ready. Baffert squeezed another workout in between these races. Like, he doesn't think this horse is fit and ready to go, at this distance. So we had to get another work into him. That's just not normal.
Right.
And to me, that's like panic mode, man. If they want to run, I got to get him ready. And Baffert likes to turn the screws with a bunch of hard 6 furlong drills, 2 or 3 of those ahead of a big race. So this is not the way he gets horses ready. I don't think this was ever their plan. Not the horse certainly is talent, but he got a big number in that race. But man, I look at the horses. He beat Hypnus, who's not that good of a horse, and he didn't crush him. In fact, it looked like Hypnus was going to win, and he kind of lost his action for a minute mid-stretch. I'm not sure what, maybe jumped some tracks or something, and he kind of lost momentum. But I didn't think it was a convincing win over a horse that would have been 50-1 in the Derby. So I wasn't nearly as impressed with the horse's effort, or I don't like the spotting at all. And given it's Baffert, and Pratt, I think this horse might end up, and a lot of people I've talked to feel just like you do, John. This is the horse that's the biggest threat. I mean, good handicappers like you. So I have a feeling this horse is going to be bet, although you never know, like I said, in the win pool, but at least in exactas and things, I think this horse might end up being the second choice. And for me, I'm going to try to fade him. Plus, I think there's a lot of speed. He kind of has to go from the rail. And that might not be the best post for him either.
Okay, let's plug in yours, because when you go to the day of the race, you're going to get my analysis on Focus. So let's plug in. What do you think, Chris?
So I gave him a 3-. I think you gave him like a 2 or something, right?
Yeah, 2.
Yeah. So, I think he could win it if, he gets the right trip, journalism doesn't fire, and he doesn't get caught up in a speed duel early, maybe sits in the pocket, because he has talent and stuff. But I think he's kind of a fringe contender, not a strong contender.
Again, to me, it goes back to I'm not disagreeing too much with what you're saying about the horse itself, but goes back to what I think the competition's, the relative competition in this race is kind of weak. Where did you go for your second? What was did you have any other horses at tier 2?
I have one horse I think is clearly the main threat in my mind. He's not as good as journalism, but I think the horse, is capable of much more likely to improve off its last race in journalism, and it's not that far behind him. And that's the 6-horse River Thames, who I don't think you were too high on.
No.
2 races back, this horse ran his first 2-turn race of his life and was only beaten a neck by Sovereignty in a race where he dug in. He got run down, but he got run down by Sovereignty, who ended up winning the Derby, who actually blew right past journalism in the Derby. So just off of that effort, comparing a common foe against the 2 horses, I don't think there's that big a separation between those 2. And I thought his Bluegrass wasn't that bad. He was kind of in a lousy spot where he was sitting third, 5 or 6 lengths off, and just not, to me, not the place you want to be. And he kind of got in chase mode, and he tried to run down the leader. He never quit, even when Burnham Square got past him. He only beaten 3/4 of a length. Again, I think maybe that wasn't his best effort. I don't think that was the best trip for him, and I think he can improve off that. And I have a feeling he could sit a really good trip in here. He likes to be kind of in that stalking role, not too far off, and it looks to me like there's some speed that could hook up in front of him, and he could sit third or fourth in a really good spot, maybe the one that can get first run and maybe hold off anybody closing late. So I think he could get a really good trip. And I think he's a pretty good horse. He's never run a bad race ever in his life.
I like him more for underneath because like numbers wise, he just never. I don't like horses that don't progress numbers wise. He's consistent, and maybe he's ready to pop a big number. I guess you could look at it maybe that way. But to me, is like I haven't seen any progression on his numbers. Like he was same numbers he was running from his. Let me just go to the grid so I can see this actually. Show you what I'm talking about. Let me get to the grid.
Yeah, while you're looking that up, the one thing I'll say that I like about him compared to the other two we've talked about is they targeted this race after the Bluegrass. It's not like he's getting rushed back because the stablemate scratched, or he's getting wheeled back because the stable wants to, win a Triple Crown race. They've given him kind of the normal spacing that trainers like Pletcher like, and he's been training pretty well. I'm watching his workout. So to me, he's coming into this race the way modern trainers like to prepare the horses, where the other two aren't. And I think there's that could be significant.
Well, I respect that. I just, like I said, you just kind of see his numbers, and then he got the early, he's getting 2 B pluses, who showed that we thought a lot of him and thought he can move up. And I guess you're right. I mean, he did run second in the
beating the neck to Sovereignty, the Derby winner, and a race where to me, I don't think he regressed in that race. The one regression might have been a little bit on that Bluegrass,
right?
But again, I didn't think he got the greatest of trips. And if you look at his numbers, if journalism runs back to what he ran, say that number's right in the Derby, 104, I think is what we had it as. The 4 or 5 points isn't a lot. It's a few lengths, and any regression or progression or trips, you can flip that pretty quick. That's why.
The other thing is that you had a couple horses coming out of that Bluegrass, ran in the Derby. The Derby was a weird day, but they didn't run well.
Yeah, but both had real excuses. I mean, what's the speed horse? Can't remember. East. Who's?
Just bring it up.
Yeah, let's bring that one up because, Burnham Square got completely shut off. He was in a pretty good spot, and he got completely shut off. And I don't know if he would have won, but he definitely would have run better. And I'm trying to remember I can't believe I can't think of the horse's name. East Avenue. Is it East Avenue?
Yeah. I think so.
They decided they're going to try to rate that horse, and that was just dumb. I could absolutely predicted that if they tried to rate him, he wasn't going to run at all.
East Avenue, yeah. East Avenue came out. Owen Almighty. Burnham Square was disappointing to me.
Owen Almighty didn't run bad in the Derby.
He had trouble, though. I mean, Burnham's had some trouble.
Yeah, he did. He had a major excuse. I mean, Brian Hernandez tried to do what he did on Mystic Dan and slipped through, and he got shut off. And so that, but East Avenue, like I said, they tried to rate him, and that I knew that would never work. That was kind of dumb. So for me, the common form line is when they ran against Sovereignty, both journalism, and he didn't embarrass himself at all against Sovereignty, I didn't think, and especially given that, that was only his first time around 2 turns.
Yeah.
Now I do think distance may not be his friend, but I think he could get a really good trip, and Preakness is a little bit, trying to win the Preakness is not nearly as stamina required that to win like the Derby, I don't think typically. So
yeah. The other thing is I think it might be a quick pace. So he's going to have to run early, harder than maybe he's ever run. And I think that I don't know what about, him finishing, especially at a longer distance like this.
I don't think it's going to be any quicker than the Bluegrass was. That one, East Avenue was sent like a quarter horse. Owen Almighty was in there. I mean, there was a lot of speed in that race.
Yeah.
So, but
He
this
didn't
is
win
good.
that.
I mean, we have a difference of
He didn't
opinion.
win.
Yeah, you are higher on goal oriented. You kind of have goal oriented where I have River
Okay,
Thames, and I have River Thames where you have goal oriented. So,
okay, so you got 2. Is he a 2 in you?
I have him as a 2-.
2-. Okay.
So to me, he could win. It's not like he has to have everything go his way. If he improves some, I think he could win the race, on the square with Journalism. But he also could win, if Journalism doesn't fire or Journalism doesn't get it, has some problem. The other thing about Journalism, his rider is not the kind of rider I want on a 3 to 5 shot. This guy can find trouble. That's why I kind of downgrade him a little bit in the derbies. I think he got a pretty good trip, and that was a pretty good ride. But I've seen Rispoli get into trouble so many times.
Yeah.
And now he's on an inside post when he's supposed to be 3 to 5. If is he gonna park him 4 wide all the way around? That might, if he does that.
He'll be in pretty good shape because the 1 and the 3 are going to really go. So.
Yeah.
Right.
But what I mean is in terms of how is he gonna try to navigate through traffic? That's where Rispoli's gets in trouble when he stays inside.
I don't think he's going to be too far back.
Okay.
I think he'll be closer. Because he could sit on fast pace. He could sit relatively close. He could sit like 4th or 5th in a fast-paced race, stay along that rail.
I guess. I think he's going to be one.
He should get the rail. The 1 and the 3 should vacate, I would assume, and he should be sitting right behind, right behind them, and then maybe you're going to see the other horse go. The Clever Again is going to go. So he may be able to just sit right behind that first 4 horses, 3 or 4 horses.
If that's true, I think he's going to be going a lot faster. I think he's not got as much early speed as people think. I think he's just been in small fields where they've been slowing the pace down in California. In the Derby, he was about where I thought he'd be. I don't know what he was. Was he 10th or 12th early?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be in the
Well,
back.
10th is like being 5th in a regular race.
Yeah, but I think that's probably where he'll be, 5th, 6th, 7th.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he'll be ahead of anybody other than maybe Sandman and Pay Billy.
He's I don't know, like I said, I think it's a different class level. I think this horse, like you see his plot. He's one of the horses that far north on the y-axis. That means he could sit closer. I think this horse is more tactical than you think, especially against this field, right? Again, it's all relative to who they're running against.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how
So
any other win contenders for you?
Well, I do think of the lightly raced horses you talked about, I like Clever Again more than goal oriented, again because they targeted this race. The spacing's a lot better. They pointed to this for a while. I'm a little worried about, he's got away with some slow early paces, but he really dusted Gaming at Oaklawn, and Gaming came back and ran a decent race in the Pat Day Mile. He's not a bad horse. He's not a top tier horse, but he beat him pretty handily. He did get to set an easy lead, but sometimes, they're on the lead because no one went that fast. And he might be able to run that same tempo sitting off the early lead and finish off the race. Now, if they send him and he's parked 3 wide in a hot pace, he doesn't have a chance. But, if he is capable of raiding off horses, that outside post gives them options. They don't have to go. They could, just sit in. They might get that pocket trip in behind the front runners.
They could.
That horse has a lot of talent, and I love Asmussen with 3-year-olds. His horses don't usually regress. They continue to improve. So for me, he's the upside horse I'm interested in. He's the other one I'd put maybe a notch below River Thames, but those are the two I think are the main threat to Journalism if he stubs his toe.
So would you put him at a tier 3?
I put him at 3+.
3+. Yeah, I also made him I think a tier 3 or 3+. I thought Journalism, goal oriented, and him were the 3 win contenders in my book. So that's
yeah. So we're really close. The only
yeah.
difference, just interchange River Thames with
Yeah.
goal oriented, and
Yeah.
we're kind of, those are the two horses where we have different opinions.
Yeah, that's
But
cool. Yeah.
but of the other ones, I think we're kind of on the same page.
Hey, I can't separate them. I mean, it's just going to be, pretty much trip or who's feeling good that day, who's handling the track. But I did have interest in Pay Billy, and the reason I know he's kind of not running against the same caliber horses, and he's running at Laurel. And believe me, I'm not looking at this horse to win or finish second. I would be looking for him in third and fourth. And the real reason is I've been watching his races, and you see this key word here, grit, Chris. I mean, this horse has got some fight to him now. Again, don't know who he's running against, but I just love that in horses. I like the fact that he gallops out. Even his last race, he looked like he moved way too early. He hit the front too early, but he just kind of like just grinds and digs in. And especially at this distance, I think he's capable of getting a trifecta or a super kind of finish. And that's all I've been looking for, because I think he'll be definitely value, right? I think he'll be well below, probably over 30 to 1 is my guess. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know about in the win pool, but in the exact is definitely.
Yeah. Like, so I'm just thinking that this is a horse that, if you got kind of the other horses, you think, well, I got the win horses, maybe who you think about King and the exact and stuff. But underneath, I definitely would take him. At least for me, I would take him over the other horses in the race.
I agree. Everything you said, and actually, some of the horses like Kentucky Outlaw have come back and run pretty well. So, I agree. As an underneath use, that's exactly the kind of horse you want, because some of the other horses we talked about, like goal oriented, clever again, they may not get the distance, right? Or River Thames even, they might be sucking air, sucking wind there at the end, and he could clunk up and get a piece at a big price. I absolutely agree.
So where did you rate him? Exactly.
I rate him a 4. I gave him a 4.
A 4.
What'd you have him as?
Same thing.
Remember?
I think a 4+.
Okay, I have him at 4. I actually have a horse, kind of the same horse, that same reasons you described, but I like a little better, and that's the 4-horse Heart of Honor, the one shipping in from Dubai.
Okay, yeah, I don't like him.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you put some notes on here, so you must have watched his races. I think that horse has shown grit in all its races, and it's always finishing the races off. Now, in a couple of the races, I think the horses were backing up in front of him.
Yes.
But in his last race, they put blinkers on, and the horse was a lot closer than it had been in its prior races. And I thought the inside of the track was where to be that day, and this horse was kind of on the outside and really dug in, and it thought it won the race. I thought it had won the race, but it ended up losing by a nostril.
Interesting. Because I watched he was between horses in that.
Right.
And then at the end, the reason he's outside at the end is because he's ducking out.
Yeah, the horse came up on his outside, looked like it was going to go by. That was actually the horse I had bet in the race. The horse that was coming up on the outside.
I didn't like that race. I mean, I don't like those three. I mean, they ran good. They ran competitively, but I just concerns about that race, and I'm concerned when horses do that late in a race. It's either they're getting out for either it's an injury or it's a grit thing. For me, it's like a very negative when a horse gets out late in a race. I followed this pattern, like over the years. They just don't come back and run well off of that kind of pattern. But the one thing I'll say is that he's been, like just consistent, right? And it's just that I don't know about these races in Dubai this year. I think it's been a little substandard than years past. So that's the other thing I'm a little negative on. I just don't know how good those horses are.
Well, I don't think we know.
We don't know,
because based on that one race where the horse had no trip at all, got wiped out at the start. So I wouldn't put any stock on that. And I thought this horse ran better than that horse that was in the Derby anyway. Yeah. And they could have been in the Derby, but they wanted to give this horse more time, and they pointed to this race, and they're thinking about staying in the U.S. for a few more races maybe. So I don't know. I like this horse. I think it's going to get completely ignored. And this trainer has shipped over and won run well with horses before in dirt races, actually in a Breeders' Cup race. So I know, I think this is the kind of horse that I definitely want to use underneath, and I pay Billy as well. I just, of the two, I like this horse. It's been running in big fields. It always finishes. And like I said, I like the fact that it was more up. It was not as far back as it had dropped in its early races in its last start when it was had the blinkers on. And also, like I thought it was on the, between, it never was on the rail, and the horse that won was on the rail all the way around.
Yeah,
So
that's true though.
I thought the rail was a place to be on that day. So anyway,
No,
not a horse I'd bet to win, but
yeah. Well, you got it at 4+.
3- is what I put it at.
Okay.
I thought there was a chance, there was a world where this horse could be the best closer if journalism doesn't run and all the other horses get tired. I thought, it could outfinish horses like Pay Billy and Sandman. So I thought maybe this could be like the shocker would be. The race falls apart, and this is the one that gets to the wire first.
I got you.
I could make it
agree.
a 4+ probably, either 3-, either one.
Because
I wouldn't bet it to win. That way.
Let's make him 4+. I agree with you because about what you said before. I think he was getting favorable paces to run at prior to that. The two back, I thought he did. 2 back and 3 back. I thought he got some favorable paces, and I'm thinking, he may be one turnish, but we'll see. I don't know enough about. I can't do a good note on those horses sometimes because I just don't know the level of competition. That's always hard. Like in the U.S., like no matter how good a horse, you could tell when a horse is from another track runs well, because even if it's a tier below, there's some at least things you can kind of ferret out. With these horses running to Dubai, I don't know.
But he has been the distance.
Yeah, no, he has been the distance. But again,
and it wasn't around one turn.
I just didn't like how he was getting out in that last race. I know he looked like he was like digging in and grit, but to me, it looked like the other thing is when they're finishing in blankets or they're close for that long and no one's gaining on them, that just maybe tell me something about the quality of the field too.
Yeah, well, I think behind those 3, there wasn't much for sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But I actually think the 3 horses that ran 1, 2, 3 aren't bad.
They're
probably as good as most of the horses in this race. So
well, we'll get a quick assessment on them. But what's the weather? That's the other thing. Is it going to be wet again or?
It's hard to. I'd say on the turf course will definitely have give in it, but it looks like it's getting better. The forecast, there might be some rain in the morning, but I think during the races there won't be any rain, and it seems like tomorrow's not as bad either. So I don't know. It's TBD, but I think there is a chance where it might, they might have opened up the track by the time they run this race. We'll see.
All right. So any other of these horses, how'd you rate some of these? I think those are kind of contenders, right? I mean, like horses that we want, that we've kind of rated the highest, at least I think.
Yeah, I think we got to talk about Sandman. I don't like him much.
Me neither.
I didn't like him going to the Derby, but he's going to take money, right? So fading him, there's some value in that. So I think we'll talk about betting the race at some point. Fading him might help you in the exactas and trifectas and superfectas. So that I don't like him much. I'm not saying he can't hit the board. He's a closer, right? So
yeah, sure. So you're thinking
4-? Probably like a 4, maybe.
4.
I'd rate him. I wouldn't ever bet him to win. And he certainly could screw up any bets if you fade him, but you don't want to be playing everybody. And he's one I would. He's the first one I toss. I don't like American Promise at all either. Although Lucas is the kind of horse sometimes he wins with, but I didn't like that horse at all going into the Derby, and I thought he was in a perfect spot, and he just had nothing late. So.
What do you got him? What are you ranking him?
I had him like a 6.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the 9.
The 9, I put him in that same sort of a Pay Billy category. I think he has upside that Pay Billy doesn't have. And Pay Billy
Yes,
You know,
I agree with that. I agree
uh,
with that. What you said.
you know, this horse is lightly raced. Again, they targeted this race. I sound like a broken record, but you know, they've been pointing for this. He's never really run a bad race, and he doesn't have to get way behind. He gets an outside post so they can pick a spot, but he doesn't drop way back. So you know, he has to improve to win for sure. I don't think he's going to win, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he hit the board. And he's another one that might get completely overlooked.
Okay, great. So we have the morning line. Okay, the live odds and double odds will come in as the races go on. So you'll see those, folks, if you have access to the plot race time. And you have now Chris's fair odds to the right of his rating, so automatically gets generated. And Chris, the only horse that actually we're showing a little bit of an edge is the number 6 River Thames, and he's just a little bit over the fair line of the morning line. But again, way too early to kind of make an assessment. But let's assume that the morning line is what it is, and during the live odds, how are you looking at this race? Or you're thinking, if you're thinking that the morning line's off, let's talk about that, because I think so too.
Yeah, I have a hard time. I guess the question I have though is
like everyone has that may be using this tool, right? How do you distinguish between like betting against tier 1s and tier 2 horses if there's value? When do you make those distinctions? Like, so if a tier 3 horse is like a real green, a very like you think you're getting tremendous value, how do you bet against your tier 1, a horse that you think has got a way better chance of winning, and a tier 2 horse? How do you assess those types?
Okay, so let's just say that River Thames was like 8-1 morning line, right? So that it has more value, because right now, if that morning line's right, there's really not a lot of value there. It's basically, the fair odds are the same as morning line. Well, let's just say it was 8 or 10-1, and then I thought like journalism was sort of the obvious horse to beat, and that both of those were the main contenders. So an easy way to bet that is you bet your value horse, in this case it'd be River Thames, to win, but then you play an exacta underneath journalism. So if you're right, that River Thames is clearly the one that's the value, but you're afraid he might get beat by journalism, you still cash in if he wins, and you can cash in if he runs second, right? So that kind of matches your opinion. You think he could get beat, and usually an 8-1 shot under the favorite is going to be a pretty good price in the exacta pool. So that's an easy way to bet it. Bet him to win, and then if you want to, you could also play some exactas with him on top of journalism. And the other thing you can do is, if you think, he's the value, but I really don't think he's going to beat journalism, then you just play, like exactas, tries, and supers, and you, with all of them with journalism on top, or most of them, and then put River Thames in the second or third spot, say, in your exactas and tries, with other horses you think are the contenders. Now, you probably don't want to put in the second and third choice in there. If that's your opinion, you probably just want to play the exacta. But let's say, I don't like Sandman, right? So I can fade him. And a couple long shots I like that might get in there, like Heart of Honor, Pay Billy, and Gosger. And maybe Clever Again is the other. So I could say like play, and if I'm going too fast, let me know. But like put journalism on top of River Thames in second, and then put Clever Again in third, and play that try. And then play the tries with the, Gosger, Pay Billy, and Heart of Honor in the 3 spot, but you'd press the one with Clever Again with more, and then maybe play. So you play around with that. So all your plays would have journalism on top and River Thames in there somewhere. You could put him only in second, or depending on how far you think he might drop. But let's say you keep him either the second or the third. But then you can fill in, so you say, he could run third. Clever Again might beat him. So I want to have that try. So I could have journalism, Clever Again, River Thames. And then in the supers, I could play that with my long shots in the 4 slot. So, but everything you're betting has, if you think journalism is kind of the one to beat, would have him on top, and then you could have River Thames in there in second or third, and you're fading a couple of the other favorites, but the other horses you like, and so then you're probably getting some value in those long shots underneath, and in both, and with River Thames in there. If he were 8-1, I'm talking like he's going to be higher than 4-1.
Right.
Because that comes up a lot. There's a horse you like that's value, but you think the favorite's legitimate.
Legitimate, yeah.
If you think it's so good that you're probably not going to win, then maybe you just play the favorite on top. If you do think you have a legitimate shot to win, and there really is value there in the win bet, play him to win, but back it up under the exactas, and then you can play additional exactas or additional tries and supers with those two, one as 1-2 or 1-3 or however you think they may finish. So that's kind of the way in the verticals I would bet in this race. I would probably wait and see between Clever Again and River Thames. If either one of those get ignored, where right now they're about the same on the morning line. If one of those were to be 8-1, and they look like they're 8-1 in the exacta pool too, not just the win pool, then I would probably, look to play most of my vertical exotics with one or both of those with journalism, and then fill them out with those long shots. And I'd be fading goal oriented, probably get some value there, because I think that's one that's going to be bet heavier than the morning line. I think that is going to be the second choice. That's my guess. It's just a guess, though.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Definitely second or third choice.
So I think I'm getting value fading him. You're getting value fading Sandman, who was like second choice in the Derby, and he'll be the one vying for second favoritism with goal earned. And you're fading, those two. And then, by fading those two, and if you can catch one of those long shots we talked about, in the try and super, along with the either Clever Again and River Thames and journalism, then I think you can get some money out of the race. That's how I'd look at it from the verticals.
Okay, and what about the horizontals now? You have the same situation here. And let's assume two scenarios. Okay, assume that you're interested in the pick four, and there's either a good value horse that you might want to really key on in one of the legs. You're kind of against the favorite in two of the other legs. So you're kind of looking at this race. How would you use the horses in this race in a pick four with that scenario?
If I played the pick four, I would probably just try to beat journalism in the pick four. Because I'll have him in verticals. If he wins, and say River Thames and Clever Again run well, and some of those long shots get in there, I'm going to have it. I'm going to make some money in the verticals. And I just think he's going to be a single on a lot of tickets. And I just, unless there was like really big prices that I thought would come in two or three of the other legs, I'd rather try to beat him, because that way, if I'm live to River Thames and Clever Again, let's say, going into the Preakness, I'm probably getting pretty good payouts by beating journalism there. And I would probably focus all my verticals with journalism on top. If I'm getting a really good score with those two, one of those two win, I'm making a nice score. Well, then I can play them underneath journalism in case he beats me, and hit the verticals if I get beat out by journalism. So that's how I think you were talking about. Sometimes you play it differently.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you got to be flexible, because it depends on if you're playing horizontals, are you live or not? Like if you have a big double to a horse, it's kind of dumb to bet it to win.
Right.
If you're already getting a really good payout, or if you're live in the pick four or the pick five, going in the last race to a horse that you like a lot. Well, the way to try to make more money on that is in the verticals, not as a win bet, right? Because you've already got him covered as a win bet.
Now, what if you were playing into a pick six pool, and same scenario, right? You kind of you have an opinion on.
Yeah, I would probably have to use journalism if I'm going to play a pick six, just because they're so hard to hit. I usually don't play the pick six, to be honest with you, unless I really like it, or there's a big carryover on a non-jackpot kind of carryover. The pick six is just so hard to hit. if you're tight like I am, it's just really hard to hit it very often.
Right.
And I just don't like to get spready. I just think you leak equity when you do that. So
Sure.
I've got to really have a reason to play it. But if I did, I would probably just either single journalism or fade him, one or the other. I wouldn't play it both ways. I'd probably say just single journalism, make it a pick 5, or try to beat journalism, and I'd probably use the 6 and the 8 and try to beat him.
Excellent. So there's been a great kind of instruction, right? Using this tool, right? You can really kind of structure your opinion and then determine, how do you assess value with that opinion versus as the odds are changing, right? And the great thing is having the double odds to give you kind of an idea of where things might end up.
Yeah.
They don't always end up there, but it gives you a good idea of where the things might end up. So I think it's a kind of more disciplined approach to handicapping, and this tool can kind of help you. And the other thing is you do have this information saved. You can go back afterwards and look at it, compare your results and so forth. And, we're constantly kind of building new things into this. So stay tuned. But I think it's a great approach for, just not only handicapping races, but also wagering on races. So I think this is a good kind of breakdown, Chris. Anything else we need to talk about on this race?
Well, just kind of reinforce what you said. I mean, you might say John likes goal oriented, but what price is he a good play? It's hard to just pick that out of the air, right? But if you go through this process, it forces you to rate every horse in the race. Then it gives you a better feel for what is actually a fair, what's the fair price and what price are you willing to bet it. Without that kind of a process, it's really hard to answer that question. I mean, unless you've been doing it for 40 years successfully, then maybe you have an intuition for it. But especially if you're relatively new to the game, it's really hard to pluck out of thin air what is the right price for a horse. But if you kind of apply this discipline, you'll get better at doing it over time too. So your lines will get better. And again, that's another really nice thing about this. When the race is over, you can go back and look at the results and say, did I miss something? Did this horse that I said had very little chance to win won? What did I miss there? Should I have rated it differently? Was it really just a fluky result, or should I have, rated this horse a little bit differently, and why? Same way with a horse that you think can't lose and it runs off the board. Sometimes that happens. It's just random. But did you miss something, or did you think it gives you that kind of feedback where you can go back and look and see, hey, if I could go back and do this differently, how would I rate these horses differently? So the next time you encounter something like that, you might be more likely to assign, a more accurate rating for that type of horse.
Yeah, and you don't do your ratings once. It's a constant evolution, right up until post time. You might see some things new that are going on in the track, bias. You might notice that especially on big days, right? You notice that there's certain runners, like trainers or that are running horses that might be running, like either a big day or two, like a Friday, Saturday, and these kind of things. You get to your point before, Chris, like, someone's really pointing to these particular days, and you could tell it with some other horses sometimes that they have in their stable. You could tell it early on, maybe the day before. If you're watching, Friday at Pimlico, and it's like, gee, like Cox's horses are really running or not running. And it's just another, right up until post time, you can change the ratings and you can tweak them any way you want. There's just, you're taking in late information and you're, adjusting for that information. There's no like set rule. I make a horse, I like a horse. Again, you're trying to assess and give value to horses, assign value to horses. And it's easier to do a rating than try to do fair odds. I mean, let the computer do that kind of stuff for you. Right. But this gives you some kind of subjective control over how you set those odds. So,
yeah, definitely. If you, like by the end of this race, there might be an obvious bias. I mean, usually you got to be careful. You try to assess a bias early in the card, but this is a 13 race card, so you'll have 5 or 6 dirt races. And, it might become obvious, it's inside, outside, speed. There might be some kind of bias. Definitely you'd want to factor that in. Or, you might look at the race, the horse throws the rider, or it's all sweaty and worked up. You might want to reevaluate if you look at those kinds of things. So you can do it right, and plus you get the feedback on the odds.
Yeah.
Might see in the double pool, especially with younger horses, this horse has really been bet a lot more heavily than you expected. Maybe you might want to upgrade that rating just factoring that in. Maybe this horse is live for the lightly raced horses or maiden races, things like that. The odds board can tell you some information you can't really glean without it.
Yeah, and if you're used, you haven't done this before, or you're kind of more of a novice, and you notice, like, instance, the live odds or the double odds are way off from your odds, you might want to reevaluate, because it's more likely, if you're new, that the live odds and the double odds are probably closer to truism than your line right now. So just take a look at that and make sure you kind of try to understand what you're missing, maybe missing. Not to say all live odds and double odds are the best, but it just if you're way off, like if it's not just one or two and you're just kind of like off, I just would reevaluate, because live odds.
And not on the morning line, but if the live odds and double odds,
right?
Say a horse is 20 to 1 and you have it 2 to 1 on your line, I even if you're not new, you might want to take a second look at that, because usually the public's not that far off. Now, sometimes you may think this horse is going to go off at 20 to 1, and I know why it's going to go off at 20 to 1. I know why I think it really should be 3 to 1 or 2 to 1, and you thought of that before the odds even come up, so you're not surprised by it. Then go for it. You think you've found an edge, so you want to try to bet into that. But it's when you expect the horse to be 5 to 1 or something, and you have it rated as 3 to 1 and it's 20 to 1 on the board, and it's 20 to 1 in the doubles pool. You might have missed something, so you might want to take a look at that, especially if it's like a horse off a layoff. Those kind of horses, sometimes they're dead on the board. That might tell you something. Doesn't mean they can't win, but you might want to lower your expectations a bit if they're really dead on the board, because it's hard for you to know if the horse is ready or not, and if the barn doesn't think that they are, sometimes that shows up on the board, that kind of race.
Just the logistical, you could sort this table by morning line, by live odds, anything, any column. You can move things around. So if you like to look at views, you can hide columns, you can not hide columns, lots of things to do with the information. Even here we have kind of just based on their speed, plot, and class, to kind of have these horses ranked and labeled, so you can sort on those things if that's something interesting to you. A lot of content, the notes of these last 3 races of the horses, along with their speed figures and grades. A lot of good content. Really, along with the plot, not much you really need other than this. There's just so much there, but we do have the grid, and you can go there. A plot race history just tells you, like, the previous races at this distance and grade. It's mostly the Preakness. The last 17 races, where these horses are coming from in terms of winning quadrant 1 and so forth. It actually has the plot for some of these past races where we have it available to us. So lots of content in a small space. And if you do want, and the other thing is, you could hover over a horse, you can see their names, and you can also click this and you can get the kind of a mini grid if you want. So you really don't even have to leave this page. There's so much stuff here. Rankings up here for different things. Just a whole lot of good information to help you assess, set your lines, and hopefully the next iteration is actually be able to place a bet right from here. So that'd be the idea. So I think you're ready, Preakness. Let's see how Chris did. And the other thing is, if you buy Optics package, the silver package, you'll get Focus, where we rate this race and other races in the pick 4. And I don't know if you looked at the pick 4, but it's kind of interesting, Chris. I don't know if you looked at some of mine.
Yeah, I did. I like the races. The weather is a little bit of a concern with the turf races. I don't think they're going to come off, but just not sure what sort of conditions we'll have. There's been some times in the Preakness last year it was pretty boggy, and sometimes there can be. That's when you can get the biases on the turf course. Sometimes when it's wet, it can either get bogged down on the inside, or maybe packed down on the inside. I don't know. You have to keep an eye on that. So it's a little harder, and so that's a great example of what John said, where you might want to adjust as you watch some of the races. If it looks like, all the horses are winning, with outside sweep, you kind of like the last move wins in the turf races, you might want to reassess. Or it seems like nobody's coming. Sometimes in the boggy turf courses, it's hard to close. It's hard to get a hold of the course, and front runners have an advantage. So that part of it makes it a little trickier, I think, on the turf racing. But there's definitely some good races in the undercard.
Yeah.
That probably better betting races than the Preakness for sure.
Right. Definitely interesting. Much more difficult too.
Yeah.
I just think that's it. I mean, other than that, check us out at OptixEQ.com. Chris, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it as always. My man.
Lots of fun. It was
All
great.
right. All right.
Anytime.
We'll see you.
All right.
We'll see you next time. We'll be back for the Belmont. Belmont at Saratoga.
Yes.
Take care, everyone.
1.25 miles, Belmont.
Yeah.